I am not surprised by the reports coming out of the United States of America regarding the lack of information, the lack of coordination, and the lack of data on the part of the Nigerian government. I think if you look at if you watch the interview of the foreign minister, our foreign minister, Mr. Toga, with Piers Morgan, he was put to the knife as to what are the numbers of the people who actually killed in Nigeria. You said you disagree with the numbers presented by international bodies. So what are the real numbers? And he could not provide any numbers. So it is very evident that there is what is called, or what I call, a no policy by the government at this minute. That is, you cannot point to any central coherent policy of the government that is aimed at tackling this particular situation, this insecurity situation that has lingered for more than a decade now. Well, we know that with regards to your question specifically, it is very simple. I don't think that in the last decade we have seen any law passed by the National Assembly that is geared towards this action, towards this issue specifically. And without any enabling law, I don't think that there can be any mechanism or any machinery that sees to their quick prosecution, or even what is it called, arrest in the first place, because you have to arrest, investigate, and then prosecute. So there is no mechanism, there is no insurgency or insecurity law that has been passed as a response, as a proactive response that maybe creates a special court, or creates, just gives the armed forces some sort of leeway or leverage in fighting this carnage. There's no centralized policy, not that we know of anyways. There's no none of these things have been provided for. So without all of these legal backing and foundations, then you cannot necessarily, or you cannot effectively prosecute terrorists. And if you look at our court as they are currently situated, obviously their dockets are congested. Cases like the Nnamdi Kanu case that we are going to talk about in a bit, it lingered for about 10 years. Most of the cases linger for more than 5, 6, 7, 8 years. So there's just no, sadly, a current policy or framework that allows for the ease of prosecution of terrorists. That is, if we have even passed the threshold of the definition of terrorist, because as it is currently, on one hand we hear bandits, we hear herdsmen, we hear this and that. I like to think they are all terrorists. They all exert fear on the people. They all kill the people. They all pillage their resources. So they are terrorists. So we are even having more foundational problems about the definition of these people and their acts, before we even go into the mechanism. But there is no machinery in place. There is no law in place. The anti-terrorism bill that was passed in 2022 was a repeal of the 2013 Act. It didn't bring anything new in terms of prosecuting terrorists, or in terms of expanding the definition, or in terms of expanding the scope, or in terms of strengthening the law enforcement agencies to ensure that this thing is brought to an end. So I think the National Assembly, and the various state houses of assembly in the respective states, especially in the north, are to contend with this failure. There is just no policy whatsoever that I know of, and I'm sure that if there is any, Mr. David, being a security expert, is going to, and he hasn't mentioned any. So it doesn't seem as if there is any coherent plan or legislation, that is geared towards solving these issues. And I believe that is where the foundational problem is at the minute. We remember when the president issued a state of emergency order in Rivers State for a political reason that we felt like was even unconstitutional. But how long is it supposed to take before we say state of emergency in most of the states of the north? In my state, for example, in Niger State, where students were kidnapped, more than 200 students were kidnapped just 48 hours ago in St. Mary's School. There is no state of emergency whatsoever. There is no policy. In fact, you don't get that there is a sense of urgency or responsibility from the government. There is no proactive measure. The State House of Assembly have not met to discuss the issue, at least not in not we are not informed about it if there's any, but I believe that there is not. So there's really no policy. There's really nothing. The government is not doing anything whatsoever. So I'm not surprised that that is the case in the United States of America. The government doesn't seem to have any data or any coherent plan, and that is why Toga was struggling with Piers Morgan. He had no data. He had no coherent plan. What are you actually doing? What are you going to do? There's really nothing on ground. So I'm sure that that position was what influenced or informed the statement of the Congress member you mentioned earlier.